Welcome to the Felt Dyslexic Artist Interview. My name is Liz Buckridge. For me, as a dyslexic artist, other artists and creatives have always been my number one inspiration. In these interviews, we talk with artists and creatives who share their stories and gain insight into their process, from inspiration to art tips, career building, and more. We're so lucky to listen to the wisdom of Curtis Speer today. I'm so excited to hear about his past and future projects and insight on life as an artist. Hey, Curtis.
Hey, Liz, how are you?
Good. Thank you for talking with us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So I'm going to jump right in. Describe the art you make. What medium do you work in, and why do you choose that medium?
So the art I make is photography, but I've also learned that when you tell people you're a photographer, they just assume you do stock images or photojournalism. This is one of the pieces behind us. It's photography printed on cotton. So I'm inspired by the Dutch-inspired masters of the 1600s. Went to school for drawing, learned how to draw, paint, sculpt, design. They gave me a paintbrush. I floundered. So I knew I couldn't be a Dutch-inspired master painter. So I got into photography to emulate the Dutch-inspired painters.
Hans Holbein.
Yeah.
Do you work in any other mediums?
Every now and then I'll play with sculpture or acrylic, just kind of a creative departure from being creative. I've dabbled in like videos, like short movies, evocative, like short films, if you will, with music and good footage. So can't say it's my strong suit, but it is a nice creative departure.
How did you get into making art?
Always been an artist ever since I was a little kid. And I grew up in Oklahoma, which is not necessarily known as a hotbed of creative nurturing. However, I was fortunate enough to be born into a family that nurtured the creativity. So I had parents that said, instead of, you're never going to make a living at art, you're never going to be successful, they would ask me, what kind of art supplies do you need? Do you need more colored pencils, sketch paper, charcoal? What do you need to foster this in order to evolve? So with that, in high school, I had 4 art classes my senior year, which propelled me to get a 4-year scholarship for college. So it paid for all my school. So being an artist actually paid off. You just have to put in the work.
I love that. Can you tell us your background and like how you first became interested in art?
Yes. So it's kind of, I think every creative person, maybe every person has some sort of traumatic event in their life that causes them to fight or flight, right? So I was abused as a kid, not by my parents. It was, babysitters, music teachers. So I turned completely inward, and I needed to channel that into something. And so I got into music, and I started playing the piano by ear, just as an escape. I became a loner. I was very insecure. I was very private. I have a twin sister. That was kind of a saving grace for me, because she was the voice. Anywhere we went, she was the gregarious center of attention, and I got to be her shadow. Until I had to get out of the house. Like, you grow up and you have to start living your own life, and you have to stop carrying that cross. So I worked through years of childhood trauma and years of burdening myself with holding on to something that no longer served me. So art was actually a saving grace. And I think anybody in a creative field probably deals with some level of that kind of thing. So.
Wow. How did you get into your specific style? Like, what themes or subjects inspire your work?
Good question. So with 4 years in college as a fine arts major, drawing, painting, sculpting, design, I got out into the real world and I thought, okay, I'm going to get into advertising. And I want to do like the storyboards. Like, this was back in the day, right? Before everything went computer generated. And I thought I would love to just sketch for a client and go, okay, so first shot, second shot, third shot. Toward the end of my college years, everything started going digital. And I thought the last thing I want to do is sit at a computer with a mouse trying to draw, because this was so personal, that pencil and the colored pencils and the erasers and the smudges on your hands, So I got into the styling world, and I worked for Neiman Marcus, Pottery Barn, Williams-Sonoma. And in that, I would design either the small jewelry sets for Neiman Marcus, precious jewelry, selling $1 million butterfly brooches, security guards everywhere. I had to create the set. Or we did room sets for Pottery Barn and Williams-Sonoma. So you'd walk into the room that I got to style. With that, I worked with photographers from all over the world. like crazy, amazing talent. So in that, I was like, okay, so how are you shooting this? What's your perspective? How do I see what you're seeing? And so one of the biggest takeaways was we see the room in 3 dimensions. We see the set in 3 dimensions. The camera will do everything in only 2 dimensions. Even though you can create a 3 dimensional looking image, it's still only going to. So there's like close one eye. So when I start composing my own stuff, like the piece behind me, I close one eye and set it up on the set and then figure out the lighting and the shadow, and then I take the picture.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So this might come a little bit, this might be like a little bit of a weird question for you, but do you consider yourself neurodivergent or neurotypical?
Great question, because I'm a nonconformist by heart. And so in my head, I'm like, oh, neurodivergent means doing everything the opposite of what society does. And then, so I feel like there's an aspect of my learning that is neurodivergent, but I'd say I'm more typical, just by my way of learning. But I do see the world completely different than a lot of people, right? I ask a lot of questions. I've always asked a lot of questions. It's gotten me in a lot of trouble. I'm the why, but that doesn't make sense. And how come you believe that? Or how come you see it that, you know what I mean? Yeah, so it's a very multi-layered question. I don't know if we have time to just go on and on about it, but I'm neurotypical.
Okay. Have you ever faced any challenges or setbacks in your art career?
Yes,
How did you
yeah.
overcome them?
I think any creative person, there's this, I keep hearing a lot around here. I'm surrounded by a hotbed of amazing, talented artists here in Newport. I keep hearing that, that imposter syndrome. I have imposter syndrome. And I'm like, what is that? Because I've never felt like a fake, but I can also admit that I don't know what I don't know. So I'm not going to sit in a room and pretend to know everything about art history or certain painters or certain eras of fine art and what was pivotal and what's political and what's controversial, but I'm definitely willing to open my ears and listen to it. So that said, the ups and downs of being a creative, you're vulnerable. You got to put your work out there, because if nobody sees it, then it's not serving anybody, right? We all have some sort of gift that we have to share, that we should share. You don't have to, but you should, because the universe kind of works in that if I give you this much and you share it, then we'll give you more to share, and we'll give you more to share. And it just builds and builds. Now, if you hold it close to you, then all of a sudden your life becomes very minimal, right? And you become isolated, or you live in a vacuum, as they say. So I put myself out there in 2017 and opened an art gallery in Provincetown. Never planned on opening an art gallery in my life, but all the times I've submitted work to other galleries, I got told no so many, over and over and over. And I'm not saying I'm not an amazing artist, but I'm not a bad artist. I definitely have an education and a skill set that can back it up, but art is subjective. So with all the no's that I've been told, I thought, well, let's just open my own gallery. And that just eliminated that thing. But at the same time, now you can't only be creative, you have to be business minded. So you can't just show up and keep the mess going on and not know how to run a business or customer service or follow through or packing and shipping and marketing and social media and answering emails on time. And so it was a lot of hats to wear. And then business started to soar. And I made a pretty good living in Provincetown running an art gallery. And then something shifted. And that's when I started doubting myself. And I thought, is my work not good anymore? Nobody's calling, nobody's emailing, nobody's coming in. What's happening? And then I had to pull back and look at the bigger picture. I go, okay, so I'm out at the tip of Cape Cod. It's hard to get to. It's wildly expensive now. It kind of pushed a lot of people to travel other places. Like it created its own problem. And it's a true art colony. And you're like, wait a minute, it's been an art colony for at least 50, 60 years that I know of. Edward Hopper lived there. So I had to shift, and I went broke, basically, and I'm being completely transparent. And so I went from really high, successful, and probably a little egoic, like I finally made it. But I'm also 51 years old, and I think there's a time in our lives we can all confidently, we should be able to say, I finally made it. And then the rug just got pulled out right from under me. And so I thought, well, it's time to shift. And what do we do? And I grew up in a military family. So uprooting and starting over was not scary to me. Making new friends is not hard, right? You got to put yourself out there. So I think with any artist, the tide rises and it falls, and you just got to know how to go with it. Because if you start resisting, you're just going to make yourself miserable. And if you try too hard, the world's going to see your work knowing that you're efforting too much, and it's going to be BS. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
Lawton, Oklahoma. Yeehaw! It's a dump of a military town. It was a safe place back in the day when my parents, they had my brother when my mom was 17, and they had me and my sister when my mom was 19. So you kind of step back and look at young people having kids back in the 70s, and we hated it. My brother and sister were just like, why are we here? This is miserable. There's nothing to do. Dad was in the Army, so we got to live in California and Alaska and Colorado, and it was always back to Oklahoma. And at one point, we're all of age, and we're like, why are we here? And parents are like, this is the safest place to raise you, and it's affordable. And now, as an adult, I understand the stresses of having to feed 5 mouths. My mom worked at a hospital, my dad was in the military, and it didn't pay. He wasn't like a high-ranking individual, but they did it the best they could with what they had, and we never lacked for anything. Like, we didn't live an opulent life, but my family's still there. My mom, dad, twin sister. My brother lives just outside of Lawton. I'm the what they call the nomad or the gypsy. But I thought, if this is my last life I get to live, or my only life I get to live, I want to experience as much as possible. And I knew staying in Lawton wouldn't be. I'd probably die a slow, painful death emotionally. So yeah, Lawton, Oklahoma, to sum that up. I don't encourage anybody to visit ever.
Do you remember doing art when you were a kid?
Yes, all the time. I'd come home from after school, and I'd sit in the garage with my colored pencils and my sketch pad, and I would look through magazines. Back in the day, I don't know if you remember, I don't know how old you are, it doesn't matter, but there was this really high-end fashion magazine called Spiegel. And it was cool in the way it was presented. So you open it one way and it's all clothes. And then you turn it upside down and open it the other way, and it's all housewares or home goods or accessories or anything but clothing. And I thought that was a really cool way to show a catalog for a company. But what I would do is try to sketch the images inside the catalog, whether they were fashion images or whether they were room sets or still lifes. So that's how I spent my childhood.
Okay, this is my favorite question.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite colorway for your art? And is the colorway different or the same as the colors in your house?
Ooh, well, that's a great question. I do love muted colors. Like, if you look at the piece behind me, there's a little pop of red, but it's a muted red. There is a congruent theme to most of my work, which is kind of it's a desaturated blue. Whether it's a lighthouse on Cape Cod, it looks more like an Andrew Wyeth painting. It's very evocative and moody, and some might call it depressing. I think there's a dark side to all of us that we just have to love on, right? So you get the light and the dark, but my friends make fun of me, like, you took the blue out of the sky again. And it seems to be this running joke, like, you took the blue out of the sky again. Like, well, when it's all bright and cheerful, it doesn't look real. And I'm not saying life shouldn't be joyful, but there's a somber side of me that I'm just honoring. So yeah, I'd say the desaturated blue is the colorway. And my house, I live in a house built in 1801. It's part of a Newport Restoration Foundation. So we're not allowed to change any colors in here. So the brown in this room has to stay brown. The green in the other room has to stay green. Otherwise, I would change some things up. But it's beautiful. So.
So describe the space where you make your art.
Could be anywhere. I've photographed this in the attic of my old gallery in Provincetown with one window, and it was on the little tabletop. The mushrooms were actually foraged in Provincetown in Beech Forest. So it was a local thing. Sometimes I'd use the corner of a room. One of my best-selling pieces is called Cicada and Quail Eggs. And it was the first piece I sold all 11 of. So I have I got the symbol tattooed right here. So the cicada is supposed to, there's a lot of different interpretations of what it's supposed to represent. But for me, it's to protect you from gossip. And in the art world, when you're completely vulnerable, people are going to talk. People are going to talk about you anyway. So you just got to roll with it. Yeah, But the cicada and quail eggs I shot in the corner of my bedroom when I lived in Laguna Beach. And it was one of my darkest, most depressing days ever. I didn't even leave the house. And I had a whole closet full of props because I used to be a prop stylist. And I thought, let's just stay in the room and just focus. And I set it up, and it was, beautiful and small and wonderful. But I didn't get it. Like, I wasn't feeling it. I just knew that I was creating this stuff. And then I let it sit on the camera for about 2 weeks, and then I uploaded it. And I was blown away. I'm like, who did that? Because it wasn't me. Like, something moved through me to create this thing in the darkest moment of my life. And it was the first image that sold all 11. So there was energy in that piece. What I'm trying to do now is whatever that energy is to channel it and let it work through me again. But I tend to get in my own way more often than not. So yeah, I can send you the image though. It's absolutely stunning.
Wow. How did your school system support your interest in art growing up?
Pretty supportive. They supported my art more than they supported me wanting to be a male cheerleader. That's like one of those things nobody ever knew about until this interview. I've always loved music and dance. So I was like, can I be a male cheerleader? And the school's like, absolutely not. There are no boys that are cheerleaders. You can play sports or something else. I'm like, wood shop or, mechanic or whatever. I'm like, I don't want to do any of that either. So I gave that up and I just really pursued the art. That said, the year I was graduating at the time, if you reached all your credits and you were in your senior year and you only needed to go to school for 1 hour because you didn't need to be there 6 hours a day, you could go to school for 1 hour and then do whatever you want. You have a job, whatever. The year I was graduating, they changed and said everybody has to be in school all day. So I go to the superintendent of the school system in Lawton, Oklahoma, and I said, I'm a straight A student. I busted my ass. I'm not going to sit in school all day and take classes that don't benefit me. So here's what I'm proposing. My parents were so supportive. And again, I was pushing back. And my dad always taught me to question authority because not everybody knows everything. Even if you're an adult, you don't really know it. So I asked the superintendent, I had my case, and I said, look, here's my portfolio. Here's my grade point. I would suggest you give me 4 art classes. I want 2 at one high school and I want 2 at the other high school. And then I'll take my math and my English. If you're keeping me in school for 6 hours a day that I don't need to be here for, give me the 2 of the strong art classes over at this school and 2 of the strongest art classes here. And it went back and forth for a summer and then they agreed to it. So I started at Lawton High in the morning, go to 2 classes there. I'd leave 10 minutes early for that second hour. And then I'd beeline it all the way across town and go to Eisenhower for the rest of the day. So I feel like I was pretty nurtured in that environment, but I had to ask for it, right? So.
Wow. How do you see your work evolving or changing in the future? What do you have planned?
Ooh, so in moving here from Provincetown, which is a true art colony, moved here 2 years ago, and Newport touts itself to be this art colony. So in running my own gallery here, I was sitting back and I'm like, what are the other galleries doing on Friday nights? Is anybody doing anything? Everybody's closing at 5. And I thought, well, this is weird. We're staying open till 9 every Friday night because people are out drinking and going to dinner and looking at art after dinner or before dinner. They're not shopping for art at lunch. So that said, I suspended my entire creative outlet to pull this art scene together, which is called the Newport Artists Collective. And I've been working on that for a year. I saw you at the salon the other night. We were hosting those every Thursday night for over a year. We're taking a little hiatus right now. Now I can recalibrate and now I can get back into being creative. So what I've been working on behind the scenes are oil pastel renderings of some of my work. So I would interpret this as an oil pastel and then also creating a line of wallpaper based on images in my work. So I would deconstruct some of my still lifes and create patterns. So I'm kind of evolving into something inspired by the photography, but on a totally different level. Thank you.
Is making art an emotional process for you or strategic?
Emotional, strictly emotional. I found there are some amazing photographers out there and that they live here and they're my colleagues and they're phenomenal. They have to plan the shots because what they're shooting is very time sensitive, daylight hours or, some are nautical photographers. So it's all conditions on the water and the whole bit. Some fly in helicopters and get their shots. So there's strategy. It's not on a whim like, oh, I feel like getting my helicopter today and going. So mine has to be way more emotionally driven. So I have to find that quiet time to tap into what I'm feeling, and then what is that still life I want to create, or what is that landscape I want to create, or that abandoned architecture, or that street scene. But I just haven't been quiet enough in my head for the last year to sit in that space. And I'm hoping in the next 2 or 3 months, at least as the town quiets down a little bit, I can tap back into that side. I know people are watching and waiting. Some people still don't know I'm an artist. And I've been in the community for 2 years. And they're like, you're an artist? I thought you just had a gallery. And I'm like, no, I create. Like, I do all kinds of things. I have a whole portfolio. So.
So can you walk us through your creative process from idea to finished piece?
Oh, sure. So it usually starts with I love music. Like I haven't had a TV in my house in 20 years. I have a TV now because it was for the gallery, and so I have this giant monitor, this big black void above the fireplace, and it bothers me a little bit, but I'm like, okay, don't push against it. You're going to use it as a resource somehow, but not right now. That said, I keep the music going. Like you walked in today, music's going. I always have the music on. Even when I leave, I come back, the music's on. That music will pretty much set the tone. So that'd probably be the first part. And then I find, okay, what am I feeling? What is it stirring up? What do I need to work on? And then I'll go through all my props, or I'll get this idea of, maybe I should go to the antique store. I need an antique monocle or an antique drum, and I want to emulate the sound of the ocean after a nor'easter. And what does that look like? So I'm going to play the role of a captain, an old mariner, and I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to go scouting. I'm going to find that spot and set up the camera and try to get that shot. And there's a whole series called the Lightkeeper series. So they're all self-portraits, but it's not about Curtis Speer being in the shot. It's about Curtis Speer emulating some captain from a long, long time ago. It could be an old soul thing. It could be something I'm just nurturing. Like, you need to tell your story, but you're doing it in your own art. So I'll have to send you those pictures as well. But that stuff is a lot more deliberate than, say, a still life. Still life, I just pick and choose the props and the way the light hits. And then, is it doing what I'm wanting it to do without forcing it? And then, obviously, I shoot in a digital format. A lot of people are still very film centric, and I appreciate the skill in that, and I appreciate the technique with the finished product. I don't want to be around all the chemicals. So more of a digital thing, and I do my own printing here. So I can control the colors and the missteps and the F-ups. Like, I'm not breaking the bank, because if the color's skewed or the page tears or whatever, I can just start over and nobody seems to know. So it's kind of a general walking you through my process.
How do you combine the art you love to make and the art you sell?
Ooh, they're two very different things. I mean, if you look around, all the art in the house is stuff that I've bought from other artists when I sell my own work. That's just the way I operate. So when I sell a piece, I try to support another artist, whether it's somebody I know, somebody I found through social media, or somebody I've shown in my own gallery. Most of it is pretty weird. Like, it's not decorative art. I'm not shopping at Crate and Barrel or Home Goods to just fill the walls. I want stuff that resonates with me, or ties into some childhood aspect, or just something quirky where it's like, oh, that's kind of dark and messed up, and I kind of love it, and I don't want to look at it, but I want to stare at it. So the work I do is probably more on the safe side, which I don't know if is a disservice to my own creativity, because I do have a dark side. I don't know if anybody's ready to see that. Maybe someday I'll tap into it, like Trent Reznor from 9 Inch Nails, and then just go full on dark, Marilyn Manson mode, and then just go light and Wizard of Oz. Who knows? So
how do people find your art to purchase?
online. So I talked to you briefly before our interview, and there's been a lot of scams, a lot of people using my images to scam people out of money in the guise of trying to sell them art. I can't get ahead of it. I've reported so much to Meta. Their blanket responses, or their boilerplate responses, we don't see how this goes against our community guidelines. Prior to all these hiccups, which started about 5 years ago, I did about 85% of my business through Instagram alone. now people don't know if they're talking to the real Curtis. And I don't even know if I'm talking to a real Amanda or whatever. Like any name could go in there. I don't know if that's really them or they're just fishing for information to use to scam somebody else. So now I have a PR person that handles all the emails, all the inquiries, and it's only either directly through PR@cuspgallery.com or through the website. If there's any other channel, then people are making all kinds of email addresses up now too. So there's TikTok accounts, there's dating apps, there's Facebook, there's 74 fake Curtis Speers on Facebook, and they don't seem to care. So I don't do any of my business through any social media platform. It's got to be direct. And what I really am loving about Newport and being such a supportive community is the face-to-face contact and the points that people are connecting. That I feel like a lot of seeds have been planted that way, and people are actually going to start buying my art again in person. And I'm okay with that. I could live without social media at this point. It was fun at the beginning, and now it's humans ruin everything. So here we are.
Well, I'll put that information in the show notes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can you share a recent project or piece of work that you're particularly happy about?
Ooh. The project. You know, my own personal stuff aside, I'd say the one I'm really proud about is this Newport Artist Collective, because it's not Curtis driven, it's community driven. I don't need my name in lights. I don't need my name in the headlines. When people are like, this is because of you, it's because look what you did, look what you did. And a lot of my friends will call me Atlas. They're like, how are you carrying all of this and being creative and moving and staying connected and energetic and positive in the midst of all of it? And I think, like I said earlier, if you think broader picture, the abundance associated with that is exponential. If you keep everything right here, it was like Curtis, 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 then I live in a very myopic space, and that's not going to serve anybody. And I don't want to be famous when I'm dead. Like, I don't want people to buy my art when I'm dead. I want them to go, this guy started this thing, and look how it benefited all these people. And one of the most successful things, including the other night at the salon, which was a Salve student, Victoria, wildly, wildly talented, great turnout. Prior to that, I had a 16-year-old junior in high school from Needham, Massachusetts, that nobody knew who he was. I found him on Instagram. I was like, Zach, would you want to show at one of these salons? He's like, yeah, let's talk about it. And he sold a lot of work, and he got a huge commission, huge. And his parents came over, and just dad was in tears, beaming. He's like, look what you did for my son. I go, your son did it for himself. He goes, my son wouldn't have gotten this himself. You saw the potential and connected the dots, and look what he's doing. And I said, but that's what this is all about. And if we all just kind of thought that way, the world would be amazing, right? So that's, to answer your question, that would be the biggest project I'm the most proud of to date. Hopefully someday I'll have like a really amazing body of work that like people respond to and are clamoring to own. So, but if not, I'm fine. I'll eat my ramen noodles and drink my coffee, and I'll be fine. Yeah.
How do you stay motivated as an artist?
Whew. Well, the upside to social media is I follow a lot of art accounts. And so that keeps me inspired because I'm seeing what others are doing, whether it's AI generated or real, painting, sculpture, design, installations. I'm motivated by that, even though I may not be getting out of bed per se to do something myself, because I think every creative person needs a little downtime. In that space, that's when you refuel, that's when you recharge, and that's when you can give it 100%. If you're constantly creating, it's like if trees were always growing and never having that season, would they bear fruit? I don't know. But there's a season for everything. There's a reason everything goes dormant in the winter. I think people need to do the same, especially artists. Yeah.
I agree. Are there any artists or creatives who have influenced or inspired your work?
Well, the old Dutch masters, Edward Hopper, Andrew Wyeth, American painters, their style, their evocative nature in capturing either landscapes or lighting, or I don't know, there's just something, like I could stare at an Andrew Wyeth painting and feel 100 different emotions. Same with the Dutch masters. Like I love going to museums and looking at the way that oysters are painted on the edge of a table, or the way the glass is always half filled. I don't know if you notice this. Next time you see Dutch masters, there's always a beautiful glass and it's half full of water or wine, but it's this transparent liquid, but it's only half full. And I could stare at that for hours. And I'm just like, how did they do this? And what space were they in to do that? So again, I can't paint, but I can try to emulate some of those styles.
That's cool. What advice would you give to an aspiring artist looking to pursue a career in the arts?
Run as fast as you can. I'm kidding.
Toward it or away?
No. The advice I say this to a lot of people. Leave your ego at the door. That's the first thing. You could be the most talented. You could be a beginning artist. You could not know anything about art and pick up a pencil and like, I don't know anything about light or shadow or perspective. But leave your ego at the door, because that's only going to trip you up. And I've met some very egoic artists here, and I've had that exact conversation. Like, we can start over. You can leave your ego outside and you can come back in, or you can just leave, because we don't need it here. It's not a place for that, right? Because art is subjective, right? And I don't care how talented you are. I don't care what your degrees are in, an MFA, a doctorate, a PhD. It doesn't matter. If your ego is preceding your talent, and this could be in any industry, if your ego is preceding you, then there's a problem, right? And eventually it's going to catch up with you. So that would be the biggest word of advice. The second one is don't give up. I don't know if your fans are fans of Taylor Swift, but I heard one interview and she said, as a creative, don't ever stop creating, even when it's bad, right? Pick up that pencil, that pen, that microphone, your sketchbook, doesn't matter, your paintbrush, just keep doing it, because you're going to discover something about you that's going to take you to that next place.
Sounds good. What is your favorite book, movie, song, podcast?
Songs are all over the place. I like, well, some days I like dance music. Some days I just want to dance. Some days it's all joyful, like the universe is amazing and we're all going to live, happily ever after. And then some days are a little more in that kind of Bon Iver or Sigur Rós space, where there was a band when I first started being creative called Hammock, HAMMOCK. And it's almost basically just chords, and it does something. And you're just like, whoa. So I started taking pictures, listening to Hammock. And so I would try to emulate the emotion I was feeling, or try to capture the emotion I was feeling inside, which is pretty tough to do. So when other photographers come to me like, how'd you do this? Like, what f-stop, what aperture? I'm like, I don't know. I can't teach a photography class. I can tell you how to tap into emotion though, and try to capture that. Because I've also found, as an artist with a camera, photographer, if you get too technical, you've missed the moment. And that's just with the kind of things that I do. I'm not saying if you get too technical with photojournalism or portraits or like nautical racing, you have to get technical. You have to know shutter speed and lighting and the whole bit. Me, I have a little more wiggle room, and I don't have to prove anything to anybody. So music is pivotal in that role. The book, I talked to you a little bit about this before we started, is a recent children's book called The Opportunity. And I was scrolling through Instagram down that rabbit hole, and I was watching these people's reactions to this book, and it wasn't really telling you much about the book. It was just people crying or smiling or like without words or gasping for breath. I'm like, what is this children's book that's causing this? So of course, I think it was $17 online, ordered it, shows up 3 days later, pour myself a cup of coffee, start reading it in the morning, and then I'd start bawling. So I'll probably start crying now. It's all about, and I don't really want to give too much away, but I guess I could, because there's so much meat in it. It's about this boy who hangs out in this tree overlooking the harbor, this beautiful village and this beautiful water, and he's waiting for his ship to come in, and the ship's name is Opportunity. And so he's describing the ship. It's gilded in gold, and the sun's going to catch it, and he's going to know when he sees it that that's the ship. So he starts to see it on the horizon. He's like, oh, there it is. So I'll wait for it to get a little closer, and then I'll climb down this tree, and I'll walk through the village and get down to the dock. And so he climbs down the tree as he approaches, and he's making his way to the village, and he's like, wait a minute, but what if? And that tree is the only thing I know. That's the familiar place I know, and I like it. I'm comfortable. I'm safe. So I'll wait. I'll wait a little longer. So he climbs back in the tree. And he's looking. The ship is still kind of out there, but it's getting closer. And he's like, "Okay, I think I'm ready to go." So he goes down halfway. What if? What if? What if? What if? What if? Goes back to the tree for the same reason. Gets a little closer. He's like, "Okay, I'll try one more time. One more time." So he does this several times. I don't know how many times in the book, but he finally gets the courage to make his way down to the dock. And at this point, the ship is turned around and is going off into the sunset. And he starts screaming. He's, like, "Hey, I'm right here. I'm right here. I'm ready. I'm ready." And so the whole point of the book is you have to seize the opportunity when you see it. You can't wait and wait and wait because it's not going to last forever. It's not going to sit there at the dock and just be like, "Okay, when you're ready, we'll just come on in." It's there and it's out. So that's probably the most pivotal book. And that I just read that probably 2 months ago. And I realized I've had a pretty good time here in Newport. I'm surrounded by a lot of love and support and community and friends and an art uh, presence of all different levels and all different genres. And there was a second in me that was like, "You missed your opportunity." But I'm like, this is the opportunity. You're in it. The boat is full of all these people. So probably that's why I was crying. It wasn't a sad thing like, "Oh, my life is awful." It was like, it did something to me. So I would recommend anybody buy that book. I think it's under $20. It's a bookshelf book. Like everyone, you're on a down day, just pick it up and be like, you're gonna be fine. Yeah.
Movie?
Whew. It's an old movie. Crash. Remember that movie? Well, two movies. American Beauty. American Beauty it's pretty deep. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't get it. The guy's weird." But when you really start breaking it down and going, holy crap, the subtext in that entire film is so powerful. And when Kevin Spacey, he's laying at the table and he goes, "You have to remember. You must remember." And it's all about remembering where you came from. If you were pure consciousness and pure joy and made of pure love, that's what you got, which is why he died smiling, because he remembered. There was no fear, right? The other one's Crash because it shows both sides of humanity. And everybody in that movie, this is probably, I don't know how old Crash is, 20 years, 10 years, I don't know. Won a lot of awards, as did American Beauty. It showed both sides of humanity. So it showed the vulnerable and it showed, well, the antagonist and the protagonist. And then all of a sudden the scripts flipped for both of them. So everybody who was a hero or an asshole ended up being on the other side of it, like instantly, like karmically. It was like, you get what you give. So I would say those two movies are my go-tos if I need some sort of kind of reset. If I get caught up in my own silly little world here, you know what I mean? Like, just step back. There's a much bigger picture.
Is there a book that you recommend over and over again? Or is it just when the opportunity?
So I picked up a book. It was written in 1954 called The Power Through Constructive Thinking by Emmett Fox. And it starts off, whether you're religious or not, it starts off with the Lord's Prayer. And it breaks down every single line. And it's not Jesus, 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 and condemnation and all. It's saying, this is who you are. If you are pure love, because you came from pure love, right? We're all, call it whatever you want. If you are this, then this is what these words mean. And then it goes on to basically, thoughts become things. So everything you think about, you're your own God, if you will. You create your own experience, whether it's good or bad or controversial or sticky. You're creating it for a reason. So you don't even have to verbalize it. Energetically, everything's vibration. So power through constructive thinking gets your mind reset. And then all of a sudden you'll watch your life start opening up. And it's the weirdest thing. I read it once a year. And it gets me unstuck from something. And it's a pretty simple read. It goes like further into reincarnation, which I didn't read because I got this. Maybe I'm not ready to read that. I'm not saying I'm against it. I think energy can't be destroyed, right? So maybe we do come back. But the meat of it is you are your own creator. So only think positive thoughts.
Wow. What do you want to talk about that I didn't ask?
Ooh, what do we got? Let's see, we've talked about childhood. We've talked about my role here, my experience, vulnerability. I try to be as transparent as possible on a daily basis. Some people get it and some people ridicule me for it. I can't give it any power. I just know that I'm being authentic in the way I show up all the time. I love nurturing people. I have young artists in my orbit, and I have seasoned artists in my orbit. I have adult artists that are questioning their creativity. And what I love is I've always kind of assumed a leadership role, even in school. I was kind of like the leader of the band, if you will. Like, hey guys, we can do this thing, we can do this thing, and everybody gets on board. And I'm not taking something from you that one you're not willing to give, but I'm not taking anything from you anyway. I just want to watch you amplify. And so what I've noticed with these salons on Thursday nights is conversations I'm having with those levels of artists and creatives is the feedback I'm getting. I'm like, you know what you did for me? You gave me the confidence to do this thing that I otherwise would never have done. And all I say is it's because I see the potential in you. I don't want anything from you. I don't want a piece of the work or, commissions from your sales. I don't need that, but I want you to pay it forward. So you help the next person that you see kind of struggling or questioning. Yeah. Vulnerability and transparency. That's the key. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Curtis.
Thank you, Liz.
For letting us into your house today, which is going to be a gallery soon downstairs.
Yeah.
I felt inspired for sure. You're very inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you.
And much love. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for
I
listening.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yay.